Dust boiled in the air like smoke from an unseen fire, and the town gathered in its usual way when there was blood to be made off another's suffering. The afternoon sun bled across the boards of the auction pen, hard enough to sting eyes, harder still against the skin of the young Apache girl bound there. She was 15 at most, bones delicate, though the set of her jaw had the sharpness of flint struck to make fire. A rope tied at her wrists kept her still, but her hand clung to something small, something clenched so tight that even the trader's fist couldn't pry it loose. Lorenzo Carver stood with the rest, boots sunk deep in dust, his hat pulled low. He had not come to watch, not really. He told himself he had come for his son, 18 years old now, a boy stretched into a man but hollow in the ways that mattered. Folks whispered that a ranch could not survive on calloused hands alone, that Elias would need a woman beside him, someone to tie him to the earth. Lorenzo had ignored it for months, but the weight of a lonely homestead had grown heavy. And now the voices of neighbors and merchants rang in his skull. A son left alone grows wild, a son with a woman learns his roots. The auctioneer barked like a crow on a carcass, lifting the girl's arm as if she were nothing more than stock. Young strong. 15. She'll last you years, gentlemen. Start me at 30. Men laughed, voices sharp as knives. Some spat in the dirt. One whistled long and low. Coins rang out, numbers tossed carelessly. And all the while she did not move her eyes from the crowd. They were not eyes that pleaded, they judged, and in their dark glass Lorenzo felt his own reflection burn. The bidding rose. $50. 60. Men jostled each other, some already speaking of what they would make her do, how long she'd last under a whip. Lorenzo's throat closed. When the trader lifted the gavel to strike, Lorenzo's voice cut clean through the heat. 70. The air stilled. Heads turned. He did not flinch. The trader's grin widened like a slit throat. Sold to Carver. The rope was thrust into his palm. She stumbled forward, silent. Dust clung to her bare ankles. Still her left hand curled round that hidden scrap, as though her life's marrow lay inside. The crowd muttered, some amused, some disgusted. Lorenzo heard the words, "Fool, wasting money buying trouble." He led her away, his boots grinding into earth as though burying the sound of their scorn. The ride back to the ranch was long, and silence weighed heavier than the saddle. Elias waited by the corral when they arrived, his young face caught between pride and confusion. The girl stood in shadow as Lorenzo cut the rope from her wrists. Red marks ran raw across her skin. She made no sound. That night they sat at the long wooden table. Firelight stretched shadows across the walls, and the stew in their bowls steamed into the air. Elias passed her a tin cup of water, careful not to touch her hand. She hesitated, staring at it as though water itself might betray her. Then, slow as winter thaw, she drank. The sound of her swallowing was the only noise. The rancher's eyes strayed often to her left hand, the one that never opened. Even in her sleep later, curled on a blanket near the hearth, her fingers clamped tight, the tendons rigid, knuckles white. Whatever it was hers alone. Days wore on like wind over prairie. She moved quiet through the chores, her presence as faint as a shadow across the yard. She hauled water, gathered kindling, but always with her gaze lowered, her body angled to flee. Elias watched her with something unspoken, respect in his stillness, though he never pushed for words. One evening Lorenzo found her by the window, staring out at the horizon's line. The lantern flickered low, painting her face in gold and smoke. Her voice came like a leaf in the wind. "Nalin." It was the first time she had spoken. He nodded once. "Safe here." She did not believe him yet, he could see it. But slowly, as though pulled from some grave within her, her hand opened. She showed him a strip of cloth, frayed, embroidered with faded red flowers. The thread was delicate, a child's bonnet unfinished, the needle's work cut short. "My mother made this," she said, "for the little one she carried." Her eyes burned, not with tears but with the memory of fire. "They killed her. Took me." The cloth trembled in her hand, and in it Lorenzo saw more than fabric. He saw a grave never marked, a child never born, a mother's last labor unfinished. His chest ached, a guilt he could not name pressing down like stone. He had bought her, but what he held in that moment was no property. It was a secret carried through ash and blood. Word came days later. Riders whispered that the trader was furious, that Carver had stolen property, that he would reclaim what was his. Men muttered of torches, of guns. The ranch grew tight with waiting. Elias cleaned his revolver, oiling the chamber in silence. Lorenzo checked the rifle, set lanterns by the windows, laid wood across the doors. The air smelled of kerosene and iron, the house braced like a body ready for a blow. Outside the sky roiled dark with storm. Thunder broke with the sound of hoofs. Men rode hard, torches blazing against the rain. The trader's voice cut through the storm. "Carver, hand her over. She's mine." Lorenzo stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, rain running down his face. Elias stood beside him, jaw set, eyes lit by fire. Behind them Nalin clutched the bonnet to her chest, trembling but unbroken. "You'll not take her," Lorenzo said, his voice steady against the storm. Gunfire cracked. Splinters leapt from the porch beams. Elias fired back, his youth stripped in an instant. Lorenzo felt the burn of a bullet graze his arm but did not falter. Rain mixed with blood. The trader's men pressed in, shouting, torches waving. The storm screamed. And then, through thunder and gunpowder, Nalin stepped barefoot into the mud. The storm lashed her hair across her face, but her arm rose high, holding the bonnet toward lightning's glare. The cloth gleamed in white fire, the red stitches bright as blood. In that moment Lorenzo understood. It was not just cloth, not just memory. It was the unborn child's name stitched in thread, a sister never born, a mother's last breath turned to fabric. All innocence lost, all cruelty laid bare. His throat broke. He wept where no man dared, rain and tears won. Rage poured through him, not the rage of hate but of love betrayed, love slaughtered. With his son beside him, he lifted the rifle once more. Their shots rang like thunder made flesh. One by one the riders fell, torches drowned in mud. The storm swallowed their cries. By dawn, silence lay across the yard, broken only by the hiss of rain easing into earth. Nalin stood in the pale light, the bonnet pressed to her heart. She looked at Lorenzo then, not with fear but with a trust fragile as the first blade of spring grass pushing through frost. He lowered his rifle. Blood ran down his sleeve, yet his hand trembled not from pain but from vow. She stepped forward and placed the bonnet in his palm. His fingers closed around it, calloused and shaking. The thread was soft, the weight unbearable. He bowed his head, silent. The prairie stretched wide behind them, storm clouds lifting, sun bleeding across the horizon. The house stood scarred but unbroken, smoke curling from the chimney like a fragile prayer. And as the light struck the cloth in his hand, Lorenzo felt it. The story unfinished, the debt unpaid, the secret now bound to his own heart. Nalin's eyes held him there, dark as stone, bright as dawn. The silence between them swelled, and in it, something shifted, something not yet spoken but already carved into the marrow of their lives. And though the storm had passed, he knew another was coming.